going to quickly review the differences that we went over last week, the difference between stressors and stress. We're going to review the stress response and then review the difference between eustress and toxic stress. That'll be real quick. Then we're going to take a deep dive into the signs and symptoms of toxic stress. We'll talk about why and how to complete the stress response cycle. Last time we did like the first two parts. We'll complete it today. Those ways are mindfulness, self-care, and self-compassion. So it's not an exhaustive list, but I kind of like to put it in those three buckets, and you'll see why. We'll differentiate between burnout, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue. And then throughout the workshop, we'll practice three experiential strategies to manage stress. So we don't want to be experimental, they'll be experiential. They're all ones I've done before. So I'm going to pause for a minute and see if anybody has anything to say about the ground we covered last time, or any success or maybe lack of success that you had with any of the strategies that we tried in our last workshop.
This is Jennifer. So I have one personal strategy, which is I have to exercise every day. And if I just don't have time, it really actually it makes me crazy. So I think in aligning it to this model and shifting the way I think, I am trying other things where I can do the exercise, but if I don't have enough time, I can do other things in place of that, like maybe a mindfulness or yoga combination. There's an app I like for yoga and mindfulness combinations. And also there's Pilates with some breathing. And they have short clips too, even as short as 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So on those days when you know it's impossible to do more than that, it's nice to have that option. And I want to explore some other things as well. You know, sometimes even cooking every day is impossible. So, you know, maybe reward myself once or twice a week with ordering food and just frame it in that positive way.
Those are really great, Jennifer. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to address each one of those today. So you are right on target. And I spent a lot of time in my life really focusing on managing stress with exercise, like you mentioned, to the point where I got injured. And so I have walked that path, and I certainly don't know all the answers, but I have been there, and it can be a struggle. Last workshop, we did an exercise where we did a progressive muscle relaxation, and there's some evidence to suggest that works very similarly to exercise because we're tensing the muscles and then relaxing them. So I don't know if you tried that one, but that can be really helpful when you are just so super stressed for time. And we'll go over a couple of different, well, actually a lot of different options as well. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Yeah, and if I could just add one more thing. I remember from the first workshop as well, that stress is a part of life, right? And I always felt like, well, stress is always just about me. I need to figure out how to mitigate this stress. But just accepting that stress is a normal part of life and viewing it in a different way, being more proactive in how I handle that. And just, it's like accepting our new norms right now, right? You just have to accept that it is what it is. Life is stressful.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
And this is Carrie, and stress was made to be good. It's to help us to be able to respond. I mean, stress can be good.
Yeah.
It's in how you respond to it. So yeah, I agree with that, Jennifer.
It can be a little paradigm altering to consider stress as a positive thing. But I think to Jennifer's point, to Carrie's point, it can also be very empowering to realize, oh, I'm not a victim of stress on every occasion. Oftentimes, I can collaborate with my stress. And so that's a really empowering place to come from. And yet, what we're going to talk about today is when there is no empowering. It's become toxic. And what do we do? Or when it's just sort of teetering on that toxic edge, how can we stay empowered and move through that cycle? So let's do a quick review so we're all on the same page. But before we do, we are going to have a little experience. So last time we did a soft landing and we started with just some neck and shoulder release, a little bit of chair yoga. But today we're going to do one of my all-time favorite breathing techniques, and you can use this for yourself, obviously. It's super easy to teach to children or adults, and I have yet to find someone who didn't really enjoy it. So what we're going to do is imagine that you have a cup of your favorite hot tea or hot coffee or hot chocolate or something. And I'm going to put this down because you really do need to pretend, or you don't need to, you can pretend though. So you've got it in your hands. So go ahead if you feel like it. You can imagine that coffee or tea or cocoa in your hands. And imagine you could feel the warmth of it. I mean, just use your creativity, which is an evidence-based practice for relieving stress, and feel that warmth in your hands. And then you can go ahead and look in the cup and imagine the color, either of that beautiful cafe au lait or that chocolatey brown. Maybe it's green tea. And then to breathe, what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of bring our nose down to the cup, the imaginary cup. We're going to inhale through our nose and imagine the smell. And then we're going to exhale through our lips and blow on it to cool it down. So let's try that 3 times. Inhaling, breathing in the beautiful smell, feeling the warmth, seeing the color, and then exhaling through the lips, cooling off the hot chocolate, hot coffee, and noticing the ripple across the top. Again, inhale. And exhale. One more time. Inhale, smell it, see it, feel it. And exhale. Cool it off on the top. And you go ahead and put that down. So I have taught this technique to parents, and they have reported to me that now when a child is clearly getting anxious or revved up, they'll say, let's do our hot chocolate breathing. And they grab their mug, their pretend mug, and they do their hot chocolate breathing, and it can be really successful. So you may want to share that or just keep it for yourself, totally up to you. But one of my favorites. All righty.
That was fun, Heather. I could actually smell it.
Yeah. I know. Anybody else actually smell it? Because it really works. We feel the warmth. What's great about that exercise is we get a lot of our senses involved. And again, that's a really great evidence-based way to get as much of ourselves into the mindfulness moment and just sort of transport, and then use the breathing to regulate the autonomic nervous system. So a lot going on there, a lot packed into a really simple, easy to explain, fun to share breathing activity. So it's one of my faves. So quick review of the stress response cycle. Remember, we start in safe, in the green circle. We are hardwired as delicate, fragile humans to be safe. We like the umpire saying, you're safe. We love it. So we're constantly trying to get back there. We'll move out of that safety zone when we encounter the stressor, right? The work, a deadline, the lion, the pandemic, the hurricane, or the traumatic event. From that stressor, that environmental or that experiential stressor, we move into the stress response, that fight, flight, freeze, and also fawn, which I didn't include here, but that's another one, these stress responses that we have. And that's where we sort of stopped last week. We're going to move into the stress symptoms, which are physical, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral. And then we'll move into that blue of self-care. So these exercise, connection, the self-compassion, the mindfulness, these evidence-based activities and experiences that we can use to move ourselves back into that safe zone. So super empowering. You'll remember down at the bottom where that sort of hurricane swirl is happening. If we get stuck there, this is what causes burnout, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and even trauma. So that's why it's super important to see this as an empowered progression where we can move through the stress response cycle. And our last review, I love this slide. I love these cats. They really help me to remember that stress isn't always bad, right? If we have zero stress, no engagement, we can be really bored. Our performance is pretty lax and we look like the tabby at the top, right? We're kind of meh. A little bit of stress comes into our lives and we get curious. We're interested, we're engaged. We're like, well, what's that about? We look like this black guy, this black cat in the middle, you know, sort of like, what's happening? What's going on? I want to be a part of this. But then if we get too much stress, right, and that good stress is called eustress, we get a little too much, we start to freak out and we crash and burn and we look like this poor guy at the bottom, this poor tiger at the bottom that's like, get me out of here. I am not feeling safe, right? So just a review there, and I'm going to pause for a moment. I know, Carrie. Thank you for having me on. This is one of my favorite pictures. I use it all the time. It's just so lovely, right? This is what we all want our heart to look like. But before we move on to this evidence-based practice, I want to see if anybody has any questions about the review of the stress response cycle and the difference between the good stress and the bad stress. Stressors, any questions?
Yes, this is Carrie. You just mentioned a fourth response, fight, flight, freeze, and then you said fawn, but I don't remember us talking about that last time. Did we?
We did not talk about that one. Sometimes I leave it off, but because we're going to have a third workshop, I think we might have time to get into that. So there's another sort of vein of stress response research that's going on, and it's called the Polyvagal Theory. It's very complicated, but what they're seeing is that we have this other stress response that they're calling fawn, and it's trying to befriend the stressor. So this might look like over-functioning, or being a yes person, never being able to say no, a people pleaser. So when we feel unsafe, we try to befriend the stressor. This might also look like putting up with, I don't want to call it moderate, but like emotional or verbal abuse. And so you feel unsafe, and so you try to befriend. It's sometimes like the first layer of the stress response. And again, it's kind of complicated because they do look at the stress responses sort of in a layered effect. So it's like fawn is when you're feeling unsafe, and you would go all the way up to freeze, which is the most unsafe. So you're freezing when you see no other way out of interaction with that stressor. Does that help, Carrie? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll give this a little try, this little exercise. But if you have any questions that are coming up, please, please, please raise your hand, stop me, and we'll dig in, because I'm a geek. I love this stuff. All right. So this is a great little practice that I love to do. It's part of what I consider the gratitude or mindfulness practices. I call this the magic question. The reason I call it the magic question is it combines, for me, two of the greatest forces in the universe, gratitude and intention. And I personally believe, from my own experience, and there's evidence to back me up, that when we take gratitude and we mix it with intention, we have a powerful potion. For me, it's like magic, and that is our best way to manifest what we want. So I'm not trying to get too woo-woo on you, but I just love the feeling that I get when I have gratitude and intention. So the way that I do this is I use the magic question, which is, how does it get any better than this? So what you can do, if you want to do this a little more formally later, but we're going to practice it sort of informally right now, is imagine you've got a piece of paper and you draw a line down the middle of it. And again, if you've got access to paper and pen, you can do this right now. On one side, on the first side of the paper, you write, how does it get any better than this? And that's your gratitude statement, right? And so you think about, I just can't imagine it ever getting any better than this. I've got so much to be grateful for. So you might jot down or think of some of the things that right now, it just can't get any better than this. It might be hard. We're in a global pandemic. I get it, but it's an exercise, right? So it means it might be a little tough. We have to move some muscles that we have. It might be a little weak, but it's a good practice. How can it get any better than this? I can't imagine my refrigerator being any more full than it is. I've got good food in there. How does it get any better than this? I have a great job that I really love that is, helping me to grow my practice of gratitude and all these things. So that's just some ideas. Then on the other side of the paper, you're going to think, curiously, how does it get any better than this? What would I do if I wanted better, like some things to be better? Not in a critical way, but in a moving forward kind of way. So how does it get better than this? So a really good example would be, I love my backyard. I can look at it in gratitude and go, I can't imagine this get any better. How could this get any better? I've got a garden and a big deck and I love it. I've got a fire pit, right? I'm so grateful. Then I could go on the other side and I go, how does it get any better than this? You know what? It might be better with a hot tub. Now, I may not have the resources for the hot tub, but it gives me a thing to move toward, right? And so I'm thinking, maybe it could get a little bit better. And I'll just put my energies towards that if I want to. So the magic question, it's a really beautiful way to marry gratitude and intention and be creative and just sort of have a moment outside yourself. All right, any thoughts or comments or questions about that? Anything bubble up for anyone about that? It can be a little complicated. All right, okay. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the meat and potatoes. So if you remember back to the stress response cycle, we have these stress symptoms. And there are 4 categories, basically: cognitive, behavioral, physical, and emotional. Now, it would be not probably a great use of time, and it would bring us all a little bit down if we went through and talked about each one of these symptoms. But I do want to touch on them because it's important to understand that we get these symptoms in different areas of our life. So cognitively, you may have some concentration and memory difficulty, confusion, disorientation when you're really trying to think. And remember, cognitive is up here in the front. And if we're in stress response, we're back here in that like more primitive, some call it that lizard brain. So it's understandable that we'd have some cognitive difficulties. We're sort of stuck back here in survival brain. Behaviorally, understandably, we might try to avoid the stressor. But if it's something we can't avoid, like a tough relationship or that deadline at work, this is going to be tough. This might look like procrastination. We might have attention issues. There may be a change in your appetite. You're eating more or eating less. This might be where addiction behaviors start to come in: alcohol, drugs, gambling, shopping, online shopping. This one is sometimes a tough one for me. And this isn't about judgment so much as it's about noticing. I'll give you a really good one for me is nail biting. I have a practice of putting on these nail stickers every Sunday night to help me with my nail biting habit. The habit I'm working to control, but it also is a good indicator of toxic stress for me. When I just cannot resist and I start picking, something's happening, I have learned to notice what I notice and see if there's a connection between what I'm doing, how I'm feeling, and what's going on in my world. Sleep problems, intimacy, relationship. Then there's all the physical symptoms, right? Fatigue and exhaustion that just is unrelenting, doesn't give up. Disturbed sleep, digestive issues. This makes sense too, because when our body is in that fight, flight, fawn, freeze, we know that it shuts everything else down. And that again is, there's evidence for that. And so our digestion is going to be all off. You might have headaches, dizziness, sweating, increased heart rate, and chronic disease or autoimmune symptoms. Again, this is no, we don't want to say don't go to the doctor or if you're having symptoms, but these are just things to notice. Often we don't even pay attention. We're so stressed, we're so focused, we're so out of touch. So that's why I like to go over these, just to put a little spotlight on them. And then emotionally, we might fall into one of these three categories. There's the hyperarousal, which feels like that anxiety, panic, that continued sense of alarm. It's where a lot of us are with this pandemic. And it's just going on and on and on. And we've almost normalized this hyperarousal, this extra dumping of cortisol and these stress hormones. There's also the disassociation, this feeling of numbness, this I don't want to interact, sort of detached. This might look like somebody spending hours in front of the television, kind of zoned out. And then there's the hypoarousal, exhaustion, depression, withdrawal, not getting out of bed, those types of things. So I hope this didn't really, bring anyone too down, but you might, I see parts of myself in here as having some stress response. When I'm not completing the stress response cycle, I get stuck here. I'm going to pause and see if there's any comments or.
Yeah, this is Carrie. In the past, I always noticed that I would, while I was watching TV on Sunday nights, I would be biting my nails like crazy. And I finally just paid attention to it. And I said, I didn't do anything stressful today. Why am I doing it? Oh, because I'm going to work tomorrow. This was way back when I had a different job that was more stressful. And yeah, I noticed it and I figured out what it was from. And now I do the nail polish and things like that, so I don't bite.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right, we don't have to spend too much time here. I know it's kind of a downer. So let's move on. We want to learn some things to take care of this. One more little slide that's a little bit lower energy here. Unresolved toxic stress. So all of those symptoms, if we don't get into that empowered place and we don't use all of our resources that we're going to talk about next, this can turn into burnout, which is that physical and emotional exhaustion. It's caused by low satisfaction and feelings of powerlessness and overwhelm. And that's why I talk a lot about being empowered, because that powerless can really leave us here and lead us to burnout. Vicarious trauma. We know we can detect trauma because its core, it shows up as a fundamental beliefs. There's a change in the fundamental beliefs about the world. It's altered and possibly damaged by this repeated exposure to traumatic material. It doesn't even have to be your own. So for teachers, for helping professionals, for folks that are constantly dealing even with someone else's trauma, and this is all of us right now, we're dealing not only with our own fear of the pandemic or our own consequence of quarantine or what have you, we're, especially as teachers, you're managing your students' trauma and their upside down schedules and their unresolved stress response, right? So be on alert for this idea. If you have like this turning away from your core values, turning away from the fundamental beliefs that you have about the world, this could be vicarious trauma. And then there's the compassion fatigue, which is this profound emotional and physical erosion that takes place when helpers are unable to refuel and regenerate. This can happen when we don't notice we're biting our nails. We don't notice that we're driving with our shoulders up here like this. We don't notice that our weight is going up or down without any real change, that we are aware of, right? These are the types of things we want to be on the lookout for. Anything bubbling up for anybody when you're thinking about these ideas? All right, time to move on to some empowering information, I think. Let's do that. Okay, so a lot of words here. I wanted to have all of this information because I'll be emailing this to you so that you have all of it. But these are the evidence-based practices that can really help us to move through the stress response cycle and complete it. So please jump in here and have a conversation with me. So if you've got questions or you've got ideas or you have experiences or tips and tricks, this is the place to jump in and say, yeah, that worked. Now that didn't. How can I tweak it? What does that look like? All right, so let's have a conversation here. So the first bucket I like to think about is self-care. And these are the not so basic basics, right? So when we think about self-care, we often think about like a pedicure or getting our hair done. And for sure, those are self-care. But I'd like to sort of bring it, like ratchet this back a little bit, roll it back, and remember the basics. Exercise, right? Physical activity tells your brain that you've survived the threat and now you're safe. So if we are experiencing that original stressor, right, and it creates that stress response of safety, fight, flight, or freeze, we get that dump of cortisol and adrenaline, our body responds really well, whether the threat was real or imagined or physical or emotional, to completing that response with exercise. This does not mean you have to go run a marathon. That's what I used to think. All right. This means that you can go for the jog or the walk. You can dance. You can just shake. You can do some yoga. I just decided I'll show you one of my favorite ways to get stress out of your body with a quick little movement. Also, a regular practice can help manage stress response that's chronic. Okay, so it's great if you like have the stress response, go exercise, but it's also can be helpful as a regular practice. Connection and affection.
Oh wait,
So
Heather.
Yes.
Heather, did I hear right? Did I hear that exercise is probably one of the best ways to complete the stress response cycle? Is that true?
So the evidence, the science, the data is pretty clear that because our stress response is physically embodied, so we dump these hormones to help us move away from the danger toward the safety, wherever that might be. So that might be fighting, right? It might be flighting, might even be freezing, but even to freeze, we sort of have this physical embodied response. We know that blood moves away from our extremities and into the big muscles of our legs. We know that our heart rate either increases for fight or flight or decreases incredibly for freeze, okay? We know that our digestion, our immune system, they completely shut down because we're getting ready to focus on one thing, get myself to safety. So the most efficient way to quickly move through that stress response cycle, again, we got to notice it, right, is to get some kind of exercise. And even if we don't have a lot of time, even just to shake, honestly, I know that seems crazy, and that's what I was going to show you, is to just kind of like shake it out like a spaghetti monster. Literally moves the stress response hormones and chemicals through our body. We literally
right, this is Carrie. I want to see all of us on here now on the video do this at work. Just start shaking in your office, okay? Let's start doing that.
It's true. So Rena just said in the chat box, I noticed that a little dance break after lunch helps me get through the rest of the day. Absolutely. And that that could be a combination of moving the stress response from the more, for the first part of your day, and also just bringing in some activity and some blood and oxygen so you don't hit that afternoon slump. So I did that shaky thing. I'm going to show you. This is what I teach kids when I do classroom yoga. It's called the washing machine. And so we just put our arms out like this, and you just start moving side to side, just, kind of moving leg to leg, and you let your arms just sort of clang into you. And I just call this the washing machine, and you can slow it down or you can speed it up. And so we're moving all the way from our feet through our legs up to the torso, the shoulders and arms. And when I have to do it, I just imagine all those chemicals just sort of flinging out of me. And it's a nice reset. You can do it quickly. You can run into the bathroom and do the washing machine, shake it out, have a little dance, jump around, and you'll feel better. All right, but sometimes that's just not available. Sometimes it doesn't feel like the right thing. And some people just hate exercise, or they need to balance it with some other things, right? I'm guilty of that. So, and we do need other things to help us stay balanced and stay feeling safe. And one of those things is connection and affection. We are wired to tend and befriend. That is the parasympathetic part of our nervous system. This can look like simple conversations with friends and acquaintances, even strangers. There's a really neat study out there that says that people who are getting onto the bus, they did a study, and they expected that folks that got onto the bus and sat by themselves and were not bothered would have a better experience on the bus ride. They did this subjectively and objectively. So they actually wired participants up to look at their heart rate, their, sweat and all that stuff. And then they also did like a subjective questionnaire. The evidence was clear that people actually enjoyed their bus ride if they had some type of positive or pleasant interaction with somebody else on the bus. So that could look like, where you headed? How about those Red Sox? How, what do you think of the pandemic? Like, it could be anything, but people objectively and subjectively had less stress, had a better experience, even interacting with a stranger. So we love to interact. It makes us feel safe. So positive social media, take that social media break if you need to. And then here's evidence-based, a 20-second hug or a 6-second kiss. Now, let me say, you want to make sure this is somebody who's going to enjoy these activities, because it's an awkwardly long time to hug or kiss someone who is not anticipating it or is not interested in reciprocating. So sometimes this might be your dog or your cat or your pet turtle, but and that's the other thing that we know from the evidence, that even interacting with our pets is an amazing way to regulate our nervous system. Sleep, listen, find your magic number. It doesn't have to be the 8 hours. It doesn't even have to be consecutive. It can be put together. Try not to stress out too much. But if you need help with sleep, there's a lot of information, and I can certainly help. Jennifer agreed. Yes. Okay, nutrition. Listen, it doesn't have to be all that complicated unless you have medical issues, but fresh, colorful, and tasty, right? Not too much and not too little. Hydration, this one's easy too. 8 ounces, 16 ounces, 64 plus my body weight. Look at your pee. The clearer, the better. So if it's that simple. I like to think of our bodies as having really great dashboards. And if we pay attention, right, if we notice what we notice, we have really great self-care built in. All right, the other bucket is mindfulness.
Hold on. I just noticed one on there. I don't think you mentioned it, but massage.
Yes.
I have I go regularly to the massage place and get it every month, and it's so helpful.
It makes a huge difference. And I even just read an article the other day that they're suggesting in the pandemic, for folks that don't have access to physical touch from someone else, or maybe don't have the resources for massage, to use a foam roller. So Carrie, that's another workshop that we can do, is, using a foam roller. There's, again, evidence-based that it is helping people to complete the stress response, because they're feeling that pressure. They're having that skin and muscle interaction. All right.
Yeah, I noticed it's under the connection and affection section, but even though it's a stranger, it's still, you're right. It's that touch.
It's touch. It means a whole, again, it makes us feel safe. We're always trying to get back to that green circle, that safety. All right, so mindfulness. We want to get high on the peace train, friends. So mindfulness practices, savoring. I feel like I'm running out of time. We can always circle back. Savoring is about slowing down and using your senses to be mindful. So savoring might look like, and I've done this exercise with folks a lot, taking a single raisin and smelling the raisin, right? Feeling the raisin, putting it in your mouth and really tasting the raisin. just as a practice, not because raisins are particularly wonderful. They're not my favorite thing, but it's that practice. And noticing, oh, what do my plants really look like? What color is that? And savoring the color of your household plants. I mean, we're talking about simple things. Our hot chocolate breathing was a beautiful example of savoring. What other sense, can I bring into this? Can I feel it? Can I touch it? Can I smell it? Can I notice something about the change as I'm breathing on it? So savoring is a practice of slowing down and noticing. Slowing down your thoughts. For me, I imagine that I'm like a car with a gear shifter. And when I'm in fifth gear, I cause a lot of damage. So I try to shift myself down and into some of those lower gears. Noticing your body. We practiced that last week with find your feet, right? Like, what do oh yeah, I can feel my feet. I didn't notice that, but there they are. Gratitude, the magic question, expressing gratitude. Trauma-informed yoga, I only say that because sometimes yoga can be stressful if it's not one that's for you. So be careful of the yoga and know that you can always leave any type of class like that. And meditation. Breathing techniques. Our breath is always with us, and our breath is deeply connected to our parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous system. So we can actually tone our autonomic nervous system with these breathing techniques. So we have square breathing, which is just inhaling, holding, exhaling, and holding to the same count. I usually start with a count of 4. So you'd inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Finger breathing would be holding your hand up and inhaling up one finger, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling. This is a great one to teach to students because, again, you can do it anytime. Hey, everybody, hands up. Let's finger breathe, and you've got 10 good breaths just going over one hand. And then, of course, the hot chocolate and coffee breathing. This is one of my favorites. There is significant evidence to suggest and to make it clear that creative expression and exposure help us to complete the cycle. And this is, Carrie, where you were talking about last week, when that, when we are attacked on the safari, or we feel stressed, by an attack from a lion, and we run away, great, we get home, but then we tell our story, right? We connect with our community by telling our story. So we're doing that connection and affection over in self-care, but we're also having this creativity. And this is great for us. Watch like a really good storyteller, right? They are mitigating their stress. They are, telling that story. If you've had children or you've known someone who has a child, how many times did you tell the birth story, right? Because it was traumatic. And the more you told it, the better you felt. You were moving through that stress response. So visit a museum, either really or online. The American Museum for, the Britain Museum for American Art is open. You can go there at specific times, so there's not a lot of people. Just call and get your ticket. And I think they're still free on Saturday mornings, but you have to reserve your spot. Write a short story, paint, watch your favorite movie or TV show, because again, there's evidence that suggests that even being exposed to others' creativity, hearing someone's story, seeing the paintings at the art museum has the same effect. Podcasts, audiobooks, music, any of the things that make our life richer, okay? And then finally, this is my baby. This is my favorite one. This would be a whole nother workshop because there's so much richness here. But this idea of self-compassion, or becoming an inner ally instead of an inner critic. Most of us walk around with an inner critic that is just never stops. It's just going, going, going constantly. And there are evidence-based techniques for managing and shifting that inner critic to become an inner ally. Very briefly, it includes mindfulness, noticing what you notice without judgment, That's a really tough one. I don't know about you, but I was trained really well to judge myself pretty harshly. There's an element of humanity, which would be accepting yourself flawed, just like the rest of us. And then this idea of kindness, which is warmth and unconditional acceptance towards yourself. I sum this all up by calling it the new golden rule, which is to treat yourself the way you'd like to be treated. That'll get you in a couple of hours. It'll come back to you and go, it sounds a lot harder than it sounds, a lot harder than it sounds. All right, so let's have a little self-compassion break. We'll try something together. I'm going to stop first and see if there's any comments, questions, or feedback about everything we just went over. A lot to digest.
I think we might need to do another whole workshop on the self-compassion.
It's a big one. It's a big one. It's a lot, but it's really magical.
Important, yeah.
Really important. So we'll have a little taste of self-compassion here, of the actual work of self-compassion. And what we're going to do is I'm going to offer you, of course, this is always by invitation. If you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. No worries, okay? But this is what I call hold your own heart or hand. So if you want to do the hold your own heart, you're going to take one hand and put it right on your heart and the other hand right over your hand. And just rest there for a moment, hands on your heart. If that doesn't feel right for today, what we'll do is hold your own hand. So you can just cup one hand in the other, or you can interlace your fingers, or any way that feels comfortable for you, even just sort of holding your hands like this, however you'd like, okay? So hold your heart or hold your hand. And now just letting yourself relax, maybe taking a deep breath, inhaling and exhale. Give yourself the gift of noticing the sensation of your hands, either on your heart bone or feeling your hands on each other. Noticing that you can differentiate the weight of your hands over your heart or grasping one another. You can notice the difference in temperature under your hands or from your body to your hands or from one hand to the other. Just staying with that for a moment, allowing yourself this gift to hold your own heart or hold your own hand. Just noticing what that brings up for you. No judgment. Taking another breath. And staying with this for as long as you like. But whenever you're ready, you can come back to the moment. Denise, thank you. That is so lovely. I love that. Denise is saying in the chat box that it feels like when I pray. Yep. That is so lovely. I've had that experience too.
This is Carrie. I
Yeah.
found myself at first just feeling my sweater, and I said, no, I got to go deeper. And then I started to feel my chest, what my chest feels like with my hand on it. And then my mind just kept going, and I started picturing my heart and seeing it beating in my head. and knowing that my hands were over it, I was starting to use other senses in my imagination. So that was pretty cool.
That is lovely. That's really lovely. So this activity comes again from an evidence-based study that if we hold our heart, like we just did, or hold our hands, we actually, that what the scientists are calling, what the mindfulness scientists and stress scientists are calling it, is a reset button. And it actually calms us down and helps to complete that stress response. Because why? We start to feel safe. We start to feel connected. And as we continue to work on self-compassion, we're connecting to that inner ally, which is super safe, right? Rather than connecting to the inner critic, which isn't safe. So that's why we do some work with mindfulness and self-compassion. Awesome. So I'm just going to finish up. These are some of my favorite resources, some of my favorite apps. So Insight Timer is excellent. Headspace and Calm, these can help you if you wanted to develop a mindfulness or meditation practice. Happier and Calm Down and the Feminist Survival Project are podcasts that I highly recommend. Don't let the Feminist Survival Project scare you off with the name. These are two really smart ladies that wrote the book beneath that called Burnout. And you don't have to be a feminist to listen to what they have to say. They really have some great information, and it will be a bit of a redundancy for you, because a lot of the information that they have evidence for is what I've included in our workshop. A little slower and in more bite-sized pieces, but they do great work. If you like music, I highly recommend India Ari. If you've never heard of her, she is an amazing African-American singer-songwriter. And also Fia, F-I-A. She has a beautiful musical practice and writes her own songs, really gorgeous. Yes. Oh, you've met her twice, Rana. Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, what I wouldn't give to her. Being in her presence must be just amazing. I could listen to I Am Light like every day. I do, basically. Really amazing. On YouTube, I'd love to offer you Yoga with Adrienne. She is, I can highly recommend her. I know you won't get hurt. She is an amazing teacher. And then I have a YouTube channel that basically is like walking into my basement. There's a little bit of everything. But I do have some videos in there that I'm proud of that talk about some breathing techniques for children. So you're welcome to watch them, use them in your classrooms. The rest of the stuff is just really sort of all over the place, but you're welcome to it. And that's it. Look at that, perfect timing. I don't have anywhere to go or anywhere to be, so I'm going to stick around. If anybody would have comments, questions, or feedback, I am here for it. And there's my email address.
Well, I'll start it off. This is Carrie.
Yeah, sorry, Carrie.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I have to leave. I have to get my daughter. I have to pick her up. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. I'm loving this, and I'm really looking forward to the next workshop. Thank you for including us.
All right, this is Carrie. I just want to say I love all these little techniques you're giving us, and it's all great. It makes sense. But my problem is when the workshops are over and then I go back to work, I don't think to use them, or I don't notice when I need them. And maybe for me, I just need some kind of a strict schedule where every day at 12 o'clock, I'm going to do this technique, or, and I set it in my calendar with a reminder. I'm not sure how to actually incorporate it into my life. That's where I'm getting kind of stuck right now, but maybe we'll talk more about that in the next session too.
Well, we certainly can. I mean, I definitely can make that a focus. I think it comes back to, the real foundation of this is mindfulness. And there's some really complicated definitions of mindfulness. There's some really simple ones. But for me, the easiest way to think about it is to notice what you notice. And it's that shifting into a lower gear and thinking, okay, I don't have to know all the techniques that we talked about. There's the one that I remember, right? Maybe it's the finger breathing. Oh yeah, okay, I remember that. That's just my hand. Or I hold my hand. Okay, I'm gonna hold my hand. And it's one of those great things that we humans are hardwired to. We love to go back to success. So I have found in my professional career, as a parent, as a partner, if I can create success in whatever I'm trying to manage, right? If it's for myself with work, if I have success, if I can have a successful conversation with my partner, if I can if I can set my child up for success, they're going to want to return back to it. I don't always have the power to do that, right? I don't always have the resources. I can't always manage it. And that wouldn't be right for me to think that I could. That'd be another stressor. But where I can control, to have that success. So I say all of that, set yourself up for success. Pick one thing, maybe a sticky note with, finger breathing, and you just stick it on your computer. And then you'll remember. Or I'll give you a good story. So the first interaction I had with self-compassion, I think I've told you this one before, Carrie, was I had just been introduced to the concept, and I was really trying to be more mindful and using that idea of notice what you notice. And I'd gotten dressed for work, and I'd done my hair, and I'd done my makeup and the whole business. And, I looked in the mirror, that final check that we all do, right? I got anything in my teeth and whatever. And I looked in the mirror and I went like this. Pretty benign. But it was the first time I realized that the last look I was giving myself before I walked out the door to meet the rough and tumble world was, that's good. Good enough, right?
As good as it's gonna get.
And I thought, I would never do that to a friend. If a friend said to me, how am I looking? I'd never go, do that, because it would be so cruel. I would go, I do it to myself probably several times a day. And so I didn't want to get overwhelmed. I probably had a conversation like this with somebody, and I thought, okay, I'm going to stay right there. I'm not going to let this thing unravel and roll downhill. I'm going to stay right there. And tomorrow when I look in the mirror, I'm going to go, nothing. I'm not even going to just try to be nice, because I knew that was too big of a hurdle. I'm just going to be neutral. And so that's what I did for a while. I was just like, but I wouldn't go. So I went from nasty to neutral, and eventually I got to nice. And now I look in the mirror and I go, that's my beautiful face. And it was really awkward at first, because anything you do the first time is awkward, right? Anything. So anticipate the awkwardness. Anticipate, this is weird. This is, notice what I noticed. This is weird.
But it's practice. You're right. It takes practice to, Yeah.
First time you do a sit-up is weird too, but right, you just keep doing it. First time you kiss, that's weird. We keep doing it. Right? Because we love it. So I would say just give yourself those little things. Callie, this workshop was amazing. I love the resources at the end. Oh, Callie, you're so welcome. It is just my pleasure. It's truly, when I say I'm a nerd about this stuff, it wakes me up in the middle of the night. So the fact that it's a blessing to you is really, that's filling all my buckets, ringing all my bells. That's great. That's really great. Anybody else? Let's see. Yeah. I think that's it. I'm not in any hurry. So any other questions, comments? Denise, thank you so much. Thank you, Denise. All right, friends. Well, I don't want to make anyone feel like they can't go. So
Well, thank you so much, Heather. And thank you, Kaylee, for interpreting. It was a long hour. Thank you. You did great.
thank
And
you,
thank you so much,
Kaylee.
Heather. Again, this is just wonderful information, and you present it so well, and you're so knowledgeable about it.
Thank you.
And I mean, you really walk the talk. What is it? Walk the walk? I don't know.
Except when I fail miserably, and then I'm just part of the
No,
process.
but you're always just so positive, and it's just, yeah, I think I need some help.
No worries. We can get there. We can get there. We all do. We all need
Yeah.
some help.
So I'll start by noticing.
Notice
I'll
what
see
you
what
notice.
happens when I look in the mirror in the morning. I'll see what happens.
Start there. It's a really good spot. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you, Callie.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye. See you next week.
Bye.